Welcome to Amidon Planet, where you'll find good talk, real learning, and better teaching. I'm Joel Amidon. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Today on episode 149, we're continuing our work of exploring ideas and conversations that lead to real learning and better teaching. Today, the subject that we're going to be talking about is Stephen King's book, On Writing a Memoir of the Craft. And joining me is Dr. David Coffey from Grand Valley State University. He has a couple podcasts. He thinks deeply about teaching from many different angles and different contexts and experiences from a design perspective as well. We've talked before on another podcast, on the Teaching Math Teaching podcast. We'll put a link in the show notes. But so glad you reached out. You're like, hey, I read that book. You want to talk about it? And like, yes, let's do it. And so had a chance to get together, record it, and then share it with you. And I'm excited for it because I think we get at, I mean, one, this book is fascinating. It's fascinating to learn about Stephen King, about how he does his stuff. But then now to think about what are the lessons to be learned for teaching and having a great partner to talk about it with. So I'm excited that Dave was willing to do that with me. But before we dive in, a quick favor. Stick around to the end of this episode. I'll be sharing the trailer for my new special podcast series, 45 minutes, a family story of advocacy, education, the ongoing work of inclusion. We've already got the first episode is wrapped up and putting the finishing touches on 2 and 3. I'm excited that when we release this in the fall, I think you'll want to hear what's coming. So stick around, listen for that trailer, and that series, 45 minutes, is going to be coming this fall to Amidon Planet. Also, if you enjoy Amidon Planet, the best way to support this work is to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps others find these conversations. You can also share the podcast with a colleague, reach out with ideas or questions by sending me a note to joel@amidonplanet.com, or join my email list for updates and ways to engage further. Finally, also, we're talking about a book, and on Amidon Planet, we are about good talk, real learning, and better teaching. So when we share a book, this isn't just a book report, it's a conversation. We're going to be talking with Dave about Stephen King's book. But so what, if you like the book, go get the book. So if you're interested in this book, I got a link in the show notes. If you use that link through Bookshop, it helps support the podcast and independent bookstores. Thanks for being a part of this gathering. Now let's get into today's conversation with Dr. David Coffey on the book On Writing a Memoir of the Craft by Stephen King. Well, Dave Coffey, welcome to Amidon Planet. How are you?
I'm good, Joel. How are you?
I am well. Hey, this is we've kind of been circling each other for a while now in our different events and math teacher ed events, and so it's great to finally have something that we can have a conversation, put it in, record it, and put it out there for to share with others. So thanks for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for asking me. I've definitely felt the same way.
Yeah, nice. So, Dave, you want to give a quick introduction to who you are and what you do up there in Michigan?
Yeah, so I'm Dave Coffey. I'm a professor in the math department at Grand Valley State University. Grand Valley is a large public university, West Michigan, and I focus on math education, and my research is normally in the areas of assessment, problem or project-based learning, and design thinking.
Yeah, and so we've had a conversation before on the Teaching Math Teaching podcast, and we could put a link to that in the show notes. But also, too, you also have a podcast of your own. You want to share that too?
Well, my wife will tell you that any problem that comes up, my answer is a podcast. So I actually have a couple of podcasts.
Yeah, that's me too.
Yeah. Now, I said kindred spirits. One is the Teaching Like Ted Lasso one, which most people are familiar with. But John Golden, who's my partner in crime in a lot of these things, and I are also doing a podcast about our study abroad program in Tanzania called Teaching in Tanzania. So it's a brief. It was started out only being 3 seasons, much like Ted Lasso, but then we've added a 4th where we're focusing on sort of the alumni, what people got out of that experience.
Nice. Yeah, and it's like, the ways that you can communicate by sharing a conversation. And I think too, I don't know, maybe it's post-COVID sort of thing, just like the desire to just be in community with others, even if like I can't actually do it right now because I'm washing dishes, but I can put on a podcast and kind of be that other person in this conversation that's been
Yeah.
recorded about movies or teaching or whatever.
Yeah, and we found it's the teaching like Ted Lasso has given us an opportunity to talk to some really great people we never would have even thought we'd have a chance to sit down and talk about teaching with. And then on the other end, the teaching in Tanzania has felt like it's given our future teachers sort of a voice of, what's it like, so something that they can point to.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Well, so I put it out there. I think, was it a physical media that I'd put in somebody else's hands? Was that how I got us talking about the Stephen
I don't,
King book, the book we're
yeah,
going
I
to talk
don't
about
know.
today?
The Stephen King on writing book, it came up a couple times, I thought, in your in the podcast, and I was thinking, I would love to have a conversation about that.
Nice. And so yeah, you reached out and were like, "Hey, can we do it?" And I'm like, "Yes." I've been, and that's part of the thing. Like I've got this, Hidden Potential by Adam Grant.
Mm,
I just read that, and my wife gave me that book, and I'm like, "Oh, there's some really good stuff." And it's like, I don't know if I need to put out like, "Hey, here's a list of books that I'd love to have conversations about," and like, because all of a sudden I hear somebody talking about a book, I'm like, "Oh, yes, yeah,
hmm
can you?" I'd love to dive deep because sometimes I do the solo ones, and I don't. It's really tough for me to
Yeah.
to hear myself talk. Like that's not a conversation. That's someone just having a monologue. So
Right.
no, yeah. Why do you, so what I mean, like, so when I say something about, so we're talking about Stephen King's book On Writing, a Memoir of the Craft. So I mentioned that book, and like what about it that pinged in your head, like, ooh, I'd like to have that conversation? What stood out to you about, or what fired you up about wanting to have this conversation?
So I'm going to take a page from Stephen King, and I'm going to give you my little CV around it.
Oh,
I
nice.
promise I'll be shorter than Stephen was
Yeah,
in
yeah.
his, but I think it kind of puts it in perspective. So first of all, my first Stephen King novel that I read was Salem's Lot. I read it
Mm.
in 1979. I had been introduced to it by there was a mini series. I want to say it was on ABC. I
Yeah, yeah,
can't
yeah.
remember for
Uh-huh.
sure, but there was a mini series that scared the living
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, "Oh, what is this that's going on?" And so I wanted to read it. So that was the very first one that I read and I was hooked. And so I started reading and reading. For my freshman English, my first essay in English composition in university, I wrote about the stand
Mm.
and about the idea that, there were these two groups, good and evil, and they didn't seem like they were very much different. And I was encouraged by listening to Stephen King to hear that that was indeed one of his themes. And so I've been thinking about his. If you went and looked at my library, you'd see a bookshelf filled with his books. I can't say that I've read all of them, but I've certainly read a lot of them. I guess full disclosure, when he started getting more real life, I think about like Misery
Mm-hmm.
and the ones where I couldn't get away with saying, this is just, a story where it sounded like, oh, this could really happen.
Yeah.
That really started freaking me out, and so I
Yeah.
kind of stopped reading those. But yeah, so I have a lot of the books, and then when I started here in Grand Valley at 2000, I've got about a 3 hour or 3 hour. I have about a 30-minute drive both ways, an hour total. And it was before podcast, so I listened to a lot of books on tape.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
went to the library once and saw this on writing, and I listened to it, and the whole way I'm like, this sounds exactly what teachers need to be able to think about in terms of teaching. This would be, there's certainly not a direct one-to-one correlation in all areas, but there's certainly enough in it that could get teachers to think about improving their practice.
Nice, nice. Yeah, well, awesome. I love it. But that gets me thinking about my introduction to Stephen King was, I think my dad big at going to the library a lot. We always went to the public library, and I think eventually I think I've checked out
Mm-hmm.
Christine and Misery were two that stood out. I think I definitely Christine first, but yeah, just that sort of like tapping into that feeling of like, oh wow, if putting myself into the in and like what he talks about eventually is like it's writing is telepathy, right? You like
Hmm.
you you're experiencing what someone else is like trying to get you to experience, and all of a sudden like, oh wow, I'm thinking like I'm being like chased by a car, or a car is haunted, my car's haunted,
Hmm.
and whatnot, like in Christine. But like that sort of intense feelings, and then I look up and like, no, 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 I'm just laying in bed, like
Hmm.
reading. But all of a sudden, like or reading Misery, and like it's the scene with the and the book is much more harsh than what it was in the movie with the
Yeah.
hobbling, and I was like, oh my god, like I gotta
Hmm.
stop. I gotta wait for it to be more daylight around
Yeah.
before I dive into this any further. But yeah, it's pretty cool the way that he is able to, like obviously he's very popular with all the books and how prolific he was. But it was just curious to hear not only the story of his background that leads into it, but then also his like position on writing, and then
Hmm.
yeah, making those parallels between that and what lessons can we extract from it from a teaching perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
So I mean, I have all these like kind of like guiding questions that we try to get
Hmm.
into about this, and like so when you think about it from a teaching perspective, like what initial thoughts come into it? Like when you think about it from like, what would you, if you were going to hand this to somebody and say, hey, think about your teaching within this book, like what like kind of like guiding notes would you give as you hand this to somebody?
I think the big one, Joel, and the first one for me, and the one that I think made the way that it resonated with me to begin with, is this idea of the belief that effective teaching is storytelling.
Hmm.
And that I
Hmm.
think about it related to some of Dan Meyer's work with the three act stuff. I think about the fact that Stephen King himself was a teacher. I
Hmm.
think
Yeah.
about the fact that J.K. Rowling was a teacher, and I think that effective teaching is storytelling. And so, to what extent can we help teachers to think about the craft and this idea of telling a compelling story
Nice.
within their classroom?
Well, what exactly? I mean, like when you think about, okay, so when you think about it, teaching is storytelling. Like, just for someone that's not as in tune to maybe teaching as because we talk about it all the time. Like,
Hmm.
how would you like translate that to somebody that might be coming from outside of the teaching profession?
So one of the simplest ways is to think about just telling a story.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, an example might be we work with, I'm actually getting prepared to teach a course for pre-service elementary teachers focusing on whole number and operation. And in that, we often use a base five activity that helps them to pretty typical, across our discipline that helps the students to better understand this idea of place value. And I did that and did that and did that and never felt like I was getting at the rich idea of what it meant. They were able to be successful and check boxes, but didn't really feel like they engaged with it. And so a couple of years ago, I changed that to be a story. Right.
Mm.
I talked about that we had uncovered this artifact that had some symbols on it and had some words on it, but something had spilled and some of it was covered, and we were going to try to make sense of what was going on with this artifact. And so
Nice.
now it's a story. Now it's something that they could engage in, not just simply try to memorize what they were being taught, which believe also better reflects what kids go through as they're trying to make sense, right? Some of them who are good like me at just memorizing stuff and regurgitating it, might have done that, but most are really trying to dig and uncover some ideas. And so trying to think about telling the story that would help students to feel like they were a part of this adventure.
Mm. Yeah. Because like no matter what, like that's in like even with a book, like the story's there, despite it's not like you're making up the story. I mean, that's, I think, some of the part of math. Like, math is there, and math is, like the building of these concepts. It's going to be there even if you're not there. But like, how to,
Hmm.
like, you immerse somebody into that moment so that they can have some of the ahas that happen as like these concepts and ideas are developed over time. We had
Right.
a similar. We had a. I'm teaching some calculus, and so we're talking about limits, and
Mm.
like, there's a great curriculum from Mathematic. They're not a sponsor of the show, but they talked about this. They had a situation where Steve Nash is shooting a free throw, which was great because I had a chance to talk about how Steve Nash was a problem back in the day when he was with the Phoenix Suns, and it was like they were rip roaring all over the place. Anyway, but Steve Nash shooting a free throw, and it has the data up to a point, and then like, the video, in the kind of the story of it, the video
Hmm.
freezes, and then on the other side you have other data. Now you're trying to think like, well, where would, and right in the middle was where it probably would hit its highest point, and they're trying to think like, well, what might the highest point be? And all the data is pointing to it's 15, but you don't know for sure, right? You don't have the video, you don't have the exact
Hmm.
data to show, and it allowed kids to think like, well, it's approaching on this side, it's approaching 15, on this side it's approaching 15, so we would assume the limit would be 15, like, and like, well, what would happen if like an alien ship came and teleported it and then moved it back right in the middle, like,
Hmm.
like that could have happened. We don't know because the video is not clean, but allowing them to have this idea of like, oh, this is what's happening. We don't not quite know what's happening there, but we've now just defined what a limit is based off this story that we've immersed ourselves in. So yeah, those are the kind of versus like, what, for both of these two stories that we just said, you could just say, hey, here's the definition of a limit, write it down, and now we're going to go apply it 50 times.
Right.
And that's not as good. So yeah, teaching is good storytelling. I like that. I like
Yeah.
that. And
Well, and I think to your point too, so another big idea in on writing that King brings up is this idea. He doesn't like to plot. He
mm-hmm.
likes to excavate, right? He
Yeah,
asks these what if questions. And so and I love that the connection to that for me is the design thinking and the creativity aspect of it is asking the what if question. So, for instance, working with a teacher who's struggling to get his students to communicate, to show their work, and we're working together and we're collaborating. And the question then becomes, what if we showed them the answer? What if we already gave them the answer? We know what the answer is. What
yeah,
if we gave him the answer? What's going to happen? And doesn't know. And so he tries it out. And sure enough, the students are much more engaged. Some of them don't like it because they were so good at just giving answers.
that's right.
But most of them are like, it was nice to know the answer because I could engage. He had students who were engaged. He certainly got a lot more written work than he had in the past. And so I think the other thing in this that I take from it is the what if. What where in your classroom are there opportunities to ask that what if question?
Yeah, and it eliminate, or it, it changes that design point changes like, what is the emphasis of what we're trying to do.
Hmm.
Yeah, here's the end. This is the end of the story. How do we get there? And there could be many ways on how to get there, and so we
Hmm.
can kind of explore, and it allows kids with creativity to think in different ways versus, yeah, like, if just the goal is just to get to the end as quickly as possible versus, no, the goal is the journey. Like,
Hmm.
that's helpful too. And which, I don't know, that kind of pushed me a little bit when he thought about plot, because I don't know, you think like, well, don't you kind of need the plot? But then like, you get the chance as the writer to even be surprised by what happens,
Hmm.
which is kind of cool, I guess, too. As teaching, when I think about like some of the bright spots of teaching, you've kind of set like, hey, I know I need to get, it's kind of the same thing where I know I need to get here at the end. This is the answer. Like, we need to be done with this by the end. But how we're going to get there, the conversations that we're going to have, the ways that students are going to interact with each other to help either reveal or ask good questions or whatnot, that's going to lead, that's kind of like that uncovering of the story that's going to lead us to where we need to be at the
Hmm.
same time.
Yeah, and your point about that, Joel, for me is another big point that he makes early on. He
Just
doesn't
trying to
really
set
come.
you up, Dave. Just trying to
Yeah,
set you
you're
up. There
you're
you
doing a
go.
great job. You're good at this. It's like you've done it before.
That's right.
he doesn't come back to it, but it really stuck in my brain was this idea that fear leads to bad writing.
Mm.
Leads to bad writing. And I think the same thing could be said about teaching. Fear leads to bad teaching. If
Hmm.
I'm afraid to co-create with my class because I don't know where this lesson's going to go if I ask them, then I'm going to engage in some teaching behavior that's quite honestly, for, as far as I'm concerned, bad teaching.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to tell them what to do. I'm going to steer them in particular ways. I'm going to ask leading questions, not like you do well on here, but in a way that doesn't allow students to really think. It just is kind of natural to them. And so to what extent can we get out of our own fear, out of our own way? And I think he gives the answer to that too. And it's like practice. And isn't it it's interesting that we talk about our teaching as a practice, but we don't actually treat it as a practice too often.
Mm.
We treat it as the game. We treat it as it's got to be perfect, whereas part of the design stuff that we've been working with is asking our students and teachers that we work with to think about everything they do as an experiment. They're
Mm.
just testing things out to see what works and what needs work, and then make the necessary adjustments.
Yeah. 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 In this teaching experiment that I'm doing right now, well, not the teaching some calculus, it's like the original plan to where I am now, and that's only been what for 2 weeks, and it's like, oh, the experiment. We're in. I don't know what version we're on. If we're on like if we're talking
Hmm.
about Apple, we're on Tahoe, or we
Yeah.
like we're all sorts of different versions down the line. But it's like and seeing what are the things. I mean, and that's where I don't know, probably like maybe how King with the writing and seeing, oh, I wonder where it's going to go. I'm excited to get there to my writing time tomorrow so I can see like, oh, how is this, tweak or thing going to lead to versus like the experiment and play within
Right.
your own teaching and be like, hey, I'm putting these little tweaks. I'm going to give them the answer first, or I'm going to shake up my groups or whatever it
Hmm.
is going to lead towards something special. And then, or maybe not. They're like, well, that fell on its face. That
Yeah.
hey, don't be afraid of that. That just means like, okay, we'll try it again, or maybe we try it with different parameters around it, and then and
Right.
give it a go again.
Yep.
And I think that's probably exciting, not only for the not only for you as the teacher, but also as the learner, and to see like, oh, my teacher is still learning too about and figuring things out, and maybe asking for feedback too about how things are working and whatnot.
Right. And doing the work to be specific to this setting, to
Mm,
this group. So
yeah.
I tell my students my worst year of teaching was my second year. I'd been hired 3 days before school started the first year,
Yeah.
and I always felt like I was behind. I was also coaching girls basketball and boys basketball later, so I always felt like I was behind. So that next summer, I could have told you exactly what I was doing October 20th. Okay, because I had it all planned out. It was my worst year of teaching
Mm.
because I'd spent all my summer, doing that planning, and by
Creating the
golly, I was
perfect
going.
plan. Yeah.
Yep, and I could pat myself on the back. Your readers can't, or your what viewers can't see me myself on the back,
Yeah.
doing the because I had done exactly what I said, but it was the worst, and they hated it, and I ended up hating it, and I never did that again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those like we'll have our students here at the University of Mississippi do like a 10 day and I'm like
Hmm.
I I don't know where I'd be in 10 like
Hmm.
but so then that gets down to like one of the things he talked about in the book was a basic unit of writing, and he talked about the
Hmm.
paragraph. The paragraph was like this what he saw as a basic unit, not the sentence but the paragraph. And I also wonder, like, I kind of see, and I wonder what you would think too, like the lesson becomes this like sort of unit of understanding where I've got kind of a full experience, but then also too it's part of a bigger whole. But that's the thing where I'm tweaking and seeing how the either processes and procedures to create better efficiencies, but then opening up time for more questions and interactions. Like I don't know, I don't know if you'd thought about that, like when you came across that sense about the basic unit of writing versus the basic unit of teaching. What would you say?
Yeah, I think that the lesson is a good way of considering it from the
When you say
standpoint.
task,
Well, I was thinking about a task, but I think that I've seen too many tasks that haven't been set up well, or
mm.
in particular haven't been, there's no consolidation at the end.
Oh
It's like,
yeah,
you know, I say on a regular basis, I remember our kids coming home and us asking them, "What did you learn today?" and them saying nothing. And it probably quite literally was true because they hadn't had a chance to reflect and consolidate. So I think that you're right, an entire lesson, but making sure that that lesson is more like a paragraph that it,
yeah,
what's your thesis statement,
right.
right? What's the information that's going on, and then how are you going to wrap it up so that it's memorable at the end?
Nice, nice. Well, we kind of jumped around a little bit. I'm sorry, I get excited
No, that's all
to
right.
talk about the book, but even too to think like kind of think about like what do we learn in what teaching. So I know that it can go back and forth with regards to learn. You know, not to divvy them up that we have to talk about what we learned and then what it lead to teaching. There could be some
Hmm.
interplay back and forth. But what are some things that you either learned from the book or thought about like that sparked in your idea as a longtime teacher educator, and even might think what did that learning from it, but then also what might led to better teaching as well, because we like to talk about good learning and better teaching.
Yeah, I I was really taken, Joel, by the whole um, ideal reader and
Mm,
writing with an ideal reader in mind, and go back to your 10,
yeah,
lesson unit.
yeah,
So who's the ideal reader for that?
right.
And I've struggled with this with my own teaching in terms of when I have them do hypothetical lesson plans, it's like they're not written for anybody. Right? They're
Hmm.
written for me, but I'm not going to be the student in their classroom. And
Right.
so how do we get students to be concerned about or put learners at the center of their lessons?
Yeah.
How how can they, and I get a lot of pushback on this from teachers because they're like, I've got, well, you said you had what, 40 some in your classroom? I
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
40 in my classroom. I can't plan for just one,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So, and I'm probably too snarky in this, Joel, but my response is, so you're not going to plan for any?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
That's right. That's right.
because what design tells us is that if we plan for the one and extend for the many, come up with a creative solution,
Hmm.
that's the goal. And
Yeah.
so I always have my students now pick one student that they're really planning on for with this lesson. Who's the student that they're trying to reach or meet with this lesson? And then how are they going to extend it to everybody else? Who's their ideal reader? In this case, who's their ideal learner?
Yeah. I think a lot of times when you find that you're, man, trying to make it accessible and trying to like tap into some things like it's not just gonna it isn't just gonna be so focused on the one like there's gonna be others like oh wow
Hmm.
this is makes it more accessible for all these students and like it's the that universal design sort of
Yeah.
aspect of it. But so when you talked about like the ideal reader, that made me think about too, like just and thinking about how do we plan for at least someone, like even thinking about the idea of context and
Hmm.
the context around someone. So even to think about, we both read Stephen King works, and a lot of readers or listeners have as well. Like there's some bizarre stuff that's going on in
Hmm.
Stephen King's, but then you read the beginning of this book and you hear about some of the experiences he had of
Hmm.
like, you know, the one I thought about was cleaning the linens from either from the restaurants and hospitals. Like restaurants, that doesn't sound too
Hmm.
bad. Well, if there's food wrapped up in it and there's maggots and stuff
Hmm.
and that's like you could see like, and he's doing this in a dingy basement in cold, northeast U.S. The northeast in the U.S. Be like, I could see how he could come up with some dark stuff. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean that, and so that that content, like, oh, it makes sense how he came up with Christine. It makes sense how he came. I mean, even Carrie talks about like some of the experiences he had with his own students, and not to the extreme of Carrie, obviously,
Hmm.
but you kind of like, oh, this makes sense now. Why like where some of these stories come from, and like those building of relationships with a student, or thinking about that ideal student and having someone actually particular in mind, like things make sense all of a sudden. Like, oh, there might be some moves that out of context like don't quite make sense, but when you put it in sense of this ideal reader, or thinking about Stephen King, someone
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, that makes sense, like why we're doing, why what's happening is happening. And so I don't know, that was my first, when I was thinking about talking about this book, that was the first thing. Like, I think I understand Stephen King a lot more
Mm-hmm.
after reading this, or even too thinking about his own experience coming out of poverty, or like the his he had that ear thing that had to be
Mm-hmm.
punctured and drained, and I had some ear issues where even an earache was so painful. But I can't imagine the pain that he went through. And again, that leads to, you could probably think of some pretty dark stuff if you've had those experiences as a kid, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and I think that was the other thing in terms of ideas. We often do a mathematical autobiography. We're at the beginning, coming
Oh
near the
yeah,
beginning of the
me
semester,
too.
have students do a mathematical autobiography. And I wonder if trying to reframe it as a CV, where it's not, I do want to get to know you, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but I want you to get to know you as well. Right. It'd be interesting to know how much of his own experience he knew was playing into his choices before he wrote that section of on writing. I have a feeling he probably is pretty self-aware of that,
Yeah.
but I think that having our students write a math teacher, elementary teacher CV of what are the because yeah, I don't know. Sometimes the math autobiographies, these are some of the things I'm not quite sure how to frame it up,
Mm.
right? And I wonder if by calling it a CV and asking them for some specific examples of experiences in teaching and learning that are influencing or going to impact them, if that would make a difference. It's just an experiment, right? Who knows
Yeah.
how it'll
Yeah.
go,
There you
but it
go.
really has me thinking about doing something differently with
Yeah.
those.
Because I think for the, I mean, in those, and it's, you, we both have our doctorate, and thinking about like if I was doing research and I'm gonna do some qualitative coding, I need to like describe my
Hmm.
positionality, right? And so, what's my position? And maybe this is another tweak off of your
Yeah.
idea, a positionality statement. So I'm like, hey, here's kind of my background, and I'm putting it out there. So not only for you, the reader, know where I'm coming from, but for me myself, like I'm almost taking it and 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 putting it in a box and being like, yeah, that's who I am. So I'm going to make sure I'm keeping that in mind when I'm going through my analysis, to make sure I'm not leaning too hard, or
Yes.
being biased. I mean, there's obviously going to be bias, but at least I'm saying, hey, here's where
Right.
I'm coming from, so you know that now I'm going to be doing my thing. So like thinking about that from a like a teacher that might have had, some elementary teachers. I know that we've done the math autobiography. Some have had some bad experiences in
Hmm.
math class, and their relationship has been harmed. And like, hey, I've had these things, but now I'm going in knowing, one, I don't want those to happen from my own students, and then I want to learn about how to avoid those same mistakes that experience did to me, right? And so it's
Yeah.
almost like a position. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's a thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and Joel, I think it also helps the way that you framed it in terms of, I guess that's been kind of my experience is, and I will own that some of it is probably my framing of it,
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of times it's like, oh, math sucks because I've had sucky experiences,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not here to say that you didn't. It sounds like they were pretty
Yeah.
bad. And I've worked with enough teachers knowing they were doing the best they could under the circumstances. But often they hold on to those experiences. They're not using it like Stephen King has done to be able
Right.
to, how do I make the most of these now? And I guess that would be kind of going back to a bigger theme that I'd want teachers to see is I'd want them to be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to have a better understanding about who they are and who they are as teachers, and just recognize that just because best practices say these things, it might not be the best practice for you or the best practice for your students, right?
Yeah.
group roles is something that I always struggle with. I have some colleagues who are amazing at, I mean, who've literally written the book
Yeah,
about,
man.
group
Yeah,
roles and complex
that's right.
instruction and stuff. I have yet to crack that code, Joel.
Mm.
However, there are things in that I can do that I know that I'm not giving up. I mean,
Right, right.
old dog, new tricks, but
That's right.
I'm working on it. But at the same point, I'm also recognizing that there are things I can lean into that also can support. And so, having teachers who can figure out exactly, not all of them are going to be Dan Myers. I don't want them all to be Dave Coffeys, right?
Yeah.
I want them to find out who they are and be authentic in their teaching the way that they. If if they, I've heard people say, well, don't talk about football because not everybody knows about football. If you're a football coach and you know a lot about it and it's part of your identity and you can bring people in, I've heard you talk about this with rugby and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
You can bring people into that and tell story. Now that's different. But if
Yeah.
I'm expecting everybody else to be at the same place I am, now that's a problem.
Yeah. I play trivia on Wednesday nights.
Hmm.
We're kind of on a cold streak right now, but I'll come in on Thursday and always talk about I'll talk about some of the trivia questions that and like a lot most of the kids they don't like trivia, or they don't want to play trivia, but like guess what, they're asking me on Thursday before I even can even say anything, how'd you do?
Hmm.
Because like it's not just that, it's the relationship, it's the
Yeah.
context, and now we're using it, and now it's about us growing closer together, even on this content that maybe someone doesn't care about. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm in SEC country. There's people that go to the SEC football games that don't care about those games. I mean, a lot of people do. A lot of people
Yeah.
do, but some people are there for the spectacle.
Yeah.
So, and it's just a chance to be with others, right?
Yeah.
And be a part of something, right? And
Hmm.
so that's cool. I like that idea of like using what you have, and I mean that's an asset based perspective, right? On
Yeah.
like if that's a good thing they have, you bring it in, like
Yeah.
so that's good.
Yeah, I think, oh, who is it? Somebody from Denise Spangler, maybe from Georgia, did an AMTE talk. Who it was about. We keep telling teachers to have an asset based, but our math teachers or teacher educators, do we have an asset based approach when we're dealing with teachers?
Yeah. And Denise is one of the most competitive people I know. And like I could imagine her former classroom was like, oh, there's some competition going on because
Yeah.
she was into it. Awesome. So, and I guess well, I maybe I was going to shift you. Did you have anything else to go on that tangent,
Mm-mm.
or
Nope.
on that line? Because I was wondering about the just the whole idea, and this is something that I learned was like his his stress on the amount that he reads a lot, which makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. I mean, he is a writer, but like how much that he's talking about reading what 70 to 80 books a year at the time that he wrote, and then like learning about different ways to write, and obviously through that process of reading or just reading for enjoyment as well, but he can't help but become a better writer by doing the reading. And I wonder how many folks are engaging as much learning as they are as teaching, right? And like, and that's something that I know I needed to get back into, like some of
Mm-hmm.
the new books that had come out that had I had them, they're on my shelf, but I wasn't reading them as much. And so like I was reading this book on sabbatical. So like since then I've been crushing some books, Dave. So I'm like, and like not only like the books that I like, this is obviously not directly in line with teaching, but some of the books that have come out in our field, and like, oh man, this has been good to like finally digest this material that
Mm-hmm.
I've been missing out on. But I really liked how his stress on the reading, and how do we as teachers continue to demonstrate that we're learning. And we talk a little bit about with the experiments and things, but not only that, informed experiments where, hey, I'm
Mm-hmm.
reading about this and now I'm putting it into play.
Right. Right. And I that struck a nerve with me too. And then I think I also took it more metaphorically. I don't disagree with the need to uh, be constant, be updated about what's going on in the field. And I think that reading is a good podcasts,
Yep,
are a
podcasts
good
are
way to
great.
do that. Going to conferences are a good way to do that. a direct link, though, for me is I believe that teachers need to be in as many different classrooms as possible. You know,
Yeah.
I was a firm believer for early in my career of doing the lesson study stuff, and
Oh yeah.
I thought that was going to change everything, but there was too much else going on behind the scenes that made that difficult. But I'm a firm believer in that. I'm a firm believer in what you're doing, Joel, in terms of going in and teaching in a classroom, right? You're actually doing. I'm a firm believer in giving and having teachers do as much coaching as
Mm.
possible, right? Whether it's academic coaching or athletic coaching, things like that. As long as whatever we're doing, again, back to the task is not enough. There
Yeah, yeah.
also needs to be a chance for reflection. It was always interesting to me the number of times there was the math coach was also the football or the math teacher was also the football coach, and how different their styles were on the field and in the classroom. And then we'd sit down with them and we'd talk to them about that. Well, wait a minute, you coach your line differently than you coach your quarterbacks. Well, of course, because I says, well, why don't you differentiate in your classroom? And then a light would go off, and they'd start thinking about what that might need to
Oh
be.
yeah.
And so I don't, yeah, like I said, I agree with as much reading as possible and learning as possible, but I also believe there has to be doing involved, and you need
Mm.
to have again, it's practice.
Yeah, yeah.
You need to have as much practice as you can in what, do the science olympiad, do your kids softball team, do, even if it's not something that you're good at, do it,
Hmm.
right? Because it's good practice.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. And I think that the being able to like keep well also too going. I mean, that also involves the things, the examples that you're falling in were the you're interacting with others
Yeah.
too as well, and those like that building of relationship with the craft that you're doing, but then doing it with others allows for. I mean, that's one thing I'm loving is having all these conversations
Hmm.
with teachers and teachers that went through our program, and I'm going up to them like, how do you do that? How you like
Yeah.
it's been so awesome, but like seeing all the different things that people do and like, oh, I'm going to take a little of that, I'm going to take a little of that, take a
Hmm.
little of that to make something that it's taking. And what's been cool is I'm leaning on a lot of the teaching I did in Sauk Prairie High School, which we did Core Plus,
Hmm.
which was developed just down the road from you.
Yep. Western.
Yep. And taking that and and doing some of the practices, but now I'm throwing a little building thinking classrooms. I'm throwing a little
Hmm.
some other things into the mix that is really like exciting. It's again evolving, ever
Hmm.
evolving, but we feel like we're getting somewhere. At least I'll find out after I grade this next celebration here. So
Yeah.
let's see.
Yeah. Well, my wife, when we got married, she had three kids from a previous marriage, and she promised me nothing more than an adventure, right?
That's
And
right.
so I think about that a lot as a teacher. That's all I can promise my student. I don't have the answers. I don't know exactly what they need to do in under all circumstances. I can tell them what's worked for me and what's worked for others, but in most cases, it's just an adventure. And it doesn't hurt every time they walk into a classroom just to start humming the Indiana Jones theme song, just as a reminder.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. Uh, and I guess another thing too that I took from this is do so he had like some he has a pattern and a structure for how he does his writing. Like every
Hmm.
morning he does this. He has certain rules. He wants to get 2,000 words in or 10 pages, whatever. And like, but he's like, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy. But if when I think he says like, if the muse is not there that day, the muse knows where to find me tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like having structures and in structures doesn't mean that you're not allowing for creativity. I think structures gives the creativity a place to play in. And
Hmm.
so I really like that. I like that idea of like having structures and things, but then within there, man, who knows what's going to happen or how
Hmm.
the story is going to happen. But we know that within this, there's still some good guardrails and things that allow some comfort. But then, man, there's going to be some creative stuff that could happen in between.
Yeah, I agree. Both in the sense of making sure that the muse knows where to find you, so having some consistency there, but
Mm-hmm.
then also the structure. We just had our startup conference this past week, and we had somebody come in and talk to us about, these are the things that really increase student engagement in classrooms. And one was just getting to know students' names. So we're talking about relationships,
Well,
but
absolutely.
other was a second one was this idea of structure, that students need to come in and have a sense of what's going to be going on in classroom. I mean, again, like you said, this is the hard part. We need both structure and novelty. That's what I mean. So there's a little bit of both, but again, this is where I think practice happens. How do you get structure, but then where does the improv come in? Where does
Yeah.
the muse come in? And for me, sometimes that's that asking that what if, going full circle here, asking that what if question. What if in this case, instead of me leading the discussion, you lead the discussion?
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, it can be that simple sometimes.
It is like when you think about sometimes like some of our greatest teaching, like teaching that we do, we're not even in the I mean, we're in the room. We've created an environment for things to happen, but all of a sudden, this
Hmm.
amazing conversation or aha happens, and you're standing over there, like observing it happen. But you've put all the pieces in place for
Hmm.
it to happen, and that's man, that's some magic stuff that happens. Like when you not, but it's not magic. It's not magic. It's like there's you talk about design. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe it is Matt. But it's beautiful. How about it's
Yeah.
beautiful, right? Like, but there is some design and thing to make
Right.
that happen, and then you see the interactions and the the honoring people's ideas and false start, boom, boom, boom. But all of a sudden, like, oh wait, and boom, they come up with and they get so excited they call you over
Hmm.
to come up with this. This is what we figured out. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, what you figured out is the law of signs, but like
Uh-huh.
that's what they call it. But isn't that amazing? Yeah, you got it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things, and I guess this was the other reason that I was drawn to this book, Joel, was my wife was a first grade teacher, and I had gone into her classroom to do the practice
oh
a
yeah,
couple times
there
a
you go.
week, and I would always come early, and she was finishing up reading and writing, and I watch her do the reading and writing lesson, and I'm like, this is so cool. She was using a lot of the comprehension stuff,
Uh huh.
and I'm like, this is so cool. Why aren't we doing this in math? And so I started reading Debbie Miller and reading
Hey,
Ellen Keene
there
and
you go.
folks like that, and going to Michigan Reading Association and stuff like that, and learning about the craft from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And so that the idea of creating space that allows them to do most of the, I mean, I I still probably have, yeah, First Day of School by Harry
Oh
Wong,
yeah.
and the idea of,
Yeah.
look at a school at the end of the school day and see who's, exhausted. They've done most of the work, and
Yeah.
too often it's not the kids.
That's
And
right.
so my goal is to exhaust my students.
Yeah. Yeah. That's nice. No, that's a great point. I love that. Love that. What and and again, I also love when you're talking about getting to other fields
Hmm.
or other areas outside of math education, because we don't have it all figured out, but
Hmm.
and seeing how other people do things. I remember in my when I was teaching high school, we had like choose your own like adventure for
Hmm.
like kind of a professional development day, and it was I and one of the things was you can go to the foreign languages. We're having a like department meeting, and I was like, I'll go to that. Like, and they're talking about vocabulary. I'm like, man, I was struggling with my vocabulary because we're in like a
Hmm.
geometry unit, and I was like, this is amazing. Like
Hmm.
all these things, like because they had all these obviously all the ideas about learning vocabulary that they were talking about. Like, I'm putting these into play.
Hmm.
These are nice to go outside of your comfort zone a little bit there. But in the book, he does go into some very like kind of talks about the craft in general, but then he's like
Hmm.
he has some pretty specific things that he
Hmm.
would say, like, hey, do this, like this is going to lead to this much finished work, or even specific, like I think he had a war against adverbs or something like
Hmm.
that. Yeah, like he did not like the adverb. But so do you have like King-esque like specific advice for teaching? Like I was thinking, what is like King-esque specific advice for teaching? I'll give you one because I
Yeah.
was going through it today because again, I'm correcting some written learning celebrations that we have, and I didn't have a good pen. I'm like, don't use red. I'm going to use purple. Purple's the color of royalty, so I'm going to use purple, and just it's a little softer, and just like that's one small thing I would say. Like red has kind of got some connotation, even though like we're our football team here has red, but that's okay.
Hmm.
But red is a little harsh, so like I'm doing purple, just a little bit softer. Like that's one small King-esque type thing I would say for teaching. What about you? You got anything?
Most of mine are stolen from somebody else.
That's
I
hey,
think,
I stole that
which,
one from
yeah.
somebody else too.
So I
I think
think
Mary
that
Walls told us to correct in green, so it was good.
the thing that I always come back to is this idea of less us, more them. And Stephen
Mm,
King talks about that too in terms of
yeah,
the omitting words or the 10% thing where, your second draft ought to be 10% shorter than the one, you ought to take out 10% of the words.
yeah,
And I want the same thing. I want us to look at where are the opportunities for the students to take ownership, right?
mm,
I want by the end of my class to be obsolete. I want them to, again, hopefully setting up those
yeah,
conditions.
yeah.
But for me, the King-esque point, I think it was Gary Stagler maybe who said
Hmm.
it, was less us, more them.
Love it, love it. Yeah, I loved it when it get to that point where if I'm gone, the sub notes would say they know what to do.
Yeah.
you know, they know what
Hmm.
to do. You
Yeah.
just don't
Hmm.
don't get in the way. Just take attendance and
Right.
facilitate, but they,
Yeah.
they know what to do. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good one. Um, I'm you know what right now like I'm really enjoying the I mean we've the whiteboards
Hmm.
that we're using in class and just how important those what how does what do they call them non-permanent vertical
Vertical
surf
spaces. So
spaces, yeah,
surfaces,
surface
surfaces,
space, yeah,
maybe surfaces.
yeah. And actually, it didn't matter if it was like for me, like the horizontal is one thing. I'm seeing some great stuff with kids standing around whiteboards, but even to just having a whiteboard, like there, like you talk about fear before, just having a space where it's like, no, I can easily erase it. It's going to get erased before because we don't want the whiteboards to get ghosted, have ghosted,
Hmm.
print on there. So it's going to get erased. So I'm like, I can be a little bit more creative or adventurous in putting something down than I might on a piece of paper that feels more permanent. Even if I'm writing in pencil, it still feels more
Hmm.
permanent, and just the power and creativity that can come out in those spaces. And sometimes they might erase too quickly because I'm like, oh, that's but
Hmm.
but just like how that's a beautiful tool to use in the classrooms.
Yeah. It's interesting. We do those a lot here. I was teaching a class this last semester, winter semester, and it was just 9 students. It was our teaching math in the middle schools, and I was trying to get them up and working on the whiteboards, and they just were not having it. They were, and it
No.
wasn't. It was like we've done this enough. So they'd have one person get up, and everybody was all 9 of them were talking to that one person, and it's like,
Mm.
so this again, authentic. This is the way you guys want to do this,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
That's fine as long as you're all participating. That's the goal, and you're work. And they'd write stuff, and then somebody else would argue. Yeah, it's amazing when they've had that chance to take over. That to me is that because I could have forced it. I'd be like, nope,
Oh yeah, yeah,
everybody. Yeah, now
yeah,
it's not less me,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm in charge.
Right. Yeah. They've become so in tune to what they need in order to get the learning done. Like,
Right.
yeah, you can over influence in that space.
Are
It,
you familiar with Joyce and Shower's work, Levels of Transfer? Does that sound familiar to you at all?
no. What
I'll
is
try
Joe?
to I'll try to send it to you. It's about professional development, and I
Mm,
was thinking about it as I was reading too, because Stephen King talks about that, back to your point, Joel, about reading, that it's fair that after you've read, you're going to mimic some of that stuff. And that was what they were finding, Joyce and Showers were finding, was that teachers would start out by just mimicking.
mm,
And it would, or maybe it might not work. And if it didn't, then they would get rid of it after just a couple of tries. But the ones who are successful, they went through these, and I can't remember all of them, but it ends up in an executive transfer. They
Mm,
were able to change it to the point where it worked for them and it worked for their students. And
nice.
so how do you get to that point of executive transfer?
Yeah.
You may have to start with mimicry, but these students had done that. They'd done the everybody stand up at the board and work on it for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were ready for the next thing, which was them collaborating all together with one scribe. It's like,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Hey, mission. Yeah. It's almost like, yep, mission accomplished.
Yeah,
That's what we want. We want you to
yeah,
take ownership of your learning. That's exactly what we want.
exactly.
Was there anything else that you wanted to bring out in the book, Dave? I had one quote that I wanted to put out there, but other than that, did you have anything else that you wanted to
I
share?
I know we're late on time, and maybe this
I
is
know
another
it goes fast,
conversation.
doesn't
So
it? Yeah.
some other, yeah. But I was I was a little disappointed in the whole toolbox metaphor. It felt like
Mm,
as it went on, it was less and less, and but it got me thinking, what's in a teacher's toolbox?
mm. Well, what is in a teacher's toolbox there, Dave?
Well, I mean, directly, it feels like content is at top. You may not know it
Coming from the math
all.
department guy, come on, man.
Yeah, you need some
That's
content, and
right.
then
That's right.
pedagogy. Maybe I'm okay with switching
Yeah,
those
yeah.
if you wanted to, but then and I appreciated. I got the sense of what he was trying to say. Joel was, what else you put in your toolbox is going to be up to you. And I
Mm,
think that would be the same for teachers. What else you're going to put in the toolbox is up to you. If you're somebody who really wants to lean into storytelling, maybe one of the things is a three-act structure.
oh
You
yeah.
know, if building thinking classrooms is, maybe it's this. If it's complex instruction, there might be some others. Um, yeah, I don't know, but I was curious what would be in your toolbox.
Yeah, think the thing that I'm finding I'm leaning on right now is just not trying because I truly enjoy like the connecting with students. You
Mm,
know, trying to have that authentic connection with, and it's hard because it's got so many of them. But how do it? So then we make the base groups, or like I'm thinking about some asynchronous ways of making
mm,
connections with them through um, conversation grids, or those like those name tent conversations. I
yeah.
can't remember who put it. With Jen and I wrote about it in some book chapter at one point in time,
Hmm.
but those have been like ways to make those connections, and I think because then all of a sudden it's like I'm the either it's the taking the risk in the class, taking the risk on some mathematics, or raising their hand, or in a case like I'm going to try something on the board, or if it's like trusting their own instincts on an assessment, or if it's even a behavior management thing, like that relationship allows those things to kind of take care of themselves. I mean, not, but there's a conduit in order to make those things happen because of the relationship, and just I found like I'm really enjoying that part, and like. And then part of it too is like revealing, revealing some things about me. Today, I had a student come in with a Chicago Bears jersey, and I think it was a direct because I shared. I'm a Brewers fan, and I own one share. It's right
Hmm.
up there of the Green Bay Packers, and so he walked in with the Bears. I'm like, oh, it's all over, just like and other guys are like, oh, he's wearing a Bears jersey, like so it made a big thing out of it, but in a fun way. But that just now I know that like, hey, that relationship, so that when he's struggling, I know that he feels probably a little bit more comfortable to come in and talk to me because we have a little
Hmm.
bit better relationship, even though I won't give him any help because he was wearing that Bears jersey. The Indiana Bears, right?
Yeah.
That's where they're going. So,
Yeah, it's interesting the name tent thing. I think it was Amanda Jansen who told me about them, and she
yeah,
uses them as a conversation, a back and
yeah,
forth conversation. So they'll write something and back. And I had some colleagues at this conference the other day. We were talking about name tents, and they're like, "Oh, I don't use those. They just seem so baby to me." And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I should know their names." I said, "Well, that's not their only purpose."
that's not the only purpose.
So
Right. It's not. I mean, and I have them right on the front and the back. I think
exactly.
again, somebody told me that because I'm like, when you say something brilliant, I don't want somebody over there that can't see your, doesn't know who
Hmm.
your name is, can't see because you don't have the name on the
Right.
back.
Right.
That's right.
And
But
when I'm doing randomized groups, I can, just shuffle them and throw them out
yeah,
and find
there
your
you
name
go.
tag. Yeah. So,
Yeah. And I had someone, literally someone today say, because I asked, they're coming back for doing a master's degree. I said, hey, what's one thing I should do in the class that you took last year with me? And she's like, you know, those things where we have that conversation back and forth. I
Mm.
got so excited when you made a comment about, when we had those conversation grids back and forth. And I was like, okay, all right, there we go. And now I got to figure out how to do
Awesome.
it in my other class. But
Mhm.
the one thing I did want to talk about, because I thought it was really good with math, is one, final quote here, and I'm going to have to edit it because we're trying to keep that clean
I
thing.
gotcha.
So um, you talk about doing some writing when it hits some hard times, and here's a quote: running. So about stopping a piece of work just because it's hard, either emotionally or imaginatively, is a bad idea. Sometimes you have to go on when you don't feel like it, and sometimes you're doing a good work when it feels like all you're managing is to shovel crap from a sitting position.
Hmm.
And it was like, man, that can feel like slogging through some math at times. That can feel like, the some days of teaching at times too. But knowing, like, again, to keep persevering and keep working on, and again, setting environments for good stuff to happen. And I think, I don't know, like, because I know that, teachers struggle. Teachers struggle at times, and so how do we, help get through those tough times? And I think a lot of that is like those, learning from each other, being in a relationship, continuing to find things that help bring you joy within the work that you do. It can help you get through those bad times. Joy, yeah, there we
Yeah.
go. There's the joy.
Yeah.
Mucho
Well,
mucho joy.
yeah, that was the one that I picked up was if you can do it for joy, you can do it forever.
Mm,
Right. And so
yeah.
how do we how and I think that some of the things that we've talked about, Joel, will help that. I think the storytelling contributes to a
Yeah.
joyful classroom. I think the relationships that you've been talking about definitely create a space for joy. I think that oh, the what ifs, the surprises. You mentioned surprise a couple
Hmm.
times, right?
Yeah.
And Francis brought that up in a different podcast, Francis Sue, about the idea of surprise and joy
Hmm.
being sort of synonymous, and that C.S. Lewis wrote a whole book, Surprised by Joy,
That's
right? And
right.
so all of those things, I think, if we can create a classroom where people feel like they belong, feel like they're have something to contribute, have purpose, all of those things, that for me is the hard work, right? I spent too much of my time cutting out little stars or whatever and get and
Yeah.
instead, because I was doing all the work, and if instead I put in the hard work of building those relationships and things, I think that our students then are going to be more likely to dig into the harder stuff, especially when there's some payoff at the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Dave, I appreciate your time, but I got two
Oh,
questions I always end
okay.
with. All right. Um, well, what's something you've been learning lately, outside of this book, that's shaping your teaching?
Uh, it is, this could be a whole nother one, so you'll have to stop me, but labor-based grading.
Oh,
So I heard about labor-based grading at one of the AMTE conferences, and then I heard at that conference that they had a community circle, so I've been doing that.
yeah.
It's been a really interesting journey. Like I said, assessment is something that I'm interested in, and it's been a really interesting journey to. I'm not a huge fan of the description labor based. I'd like maybe it to be play based or exploration based, but the idea is that effort matters, and
Mm,
it's been the perfect thing for me to be doing in the teaching in Tanzania study abroad program,
yeah.
because just the fact that those kids do the orientation, travel to Africa, teach in Africa for 30 days, why do I think they need to do more, right?
Yeah.
That's and so
B
a lot of it,
minus.
yeah. Wait, you did not do your 10-page final project. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and to be fair, the people who are listening, they do more,
Yeah, yeah,
but it's related to the effort and the work
yeah.
that they put in. And so I've been really now trying to think about, so what does this look like in a more traditional setting? And I know that a lot of folks who have talked about it are doing it in writing courses, recitation
Yeah.
courses, things like that. So what does it look like in a math course? And
Mm.
so I'm going to try to explore some more of that this year.
Sounds like we have a sit down at a conference in the near future to talk about
Okay,
that. I'm
that'd
curious
be
to hear
awesome.
your ideas.
Yeah.
Um, Second, what's a piece of physical media that's been meaningful enough that you'd put it into somebody else's hands, whether it's this book that or a record, a movie.
hmm
I've been really into Blu-rays, Dave. So I've been
So I have a question for you first. When is this coming out?
Thursday.
Oh, this Thursday. Okay, so I'm going to have to. One is Francis Hu's book, Mathematics for Human Flourishing, and I can only say so much, but we're doing a book study on it.
Oh, nice,
So,
nice. Well,
yeah.
and I'm going to put a link in the show notes to your conversation with him on teaching like Ted Lasso.
Okay, and
Um,
put yours on there too because we
oh,
reference yours.
I could self
Yeah,
promote. That's no
yeah,
problem there.
no problem there. Good.
Yeah, but his book,
And
yeah, his book
yeah,
is awesome. Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. And the other one is my son the other day was asking me something about Monty Python. Well, he was actually asking me. He's 40. It's my stepson, and he was asking me, what TV was like back in the old days. And I said, well, there were, three channels. This was when I lived up
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Marquette. There were three channels. One of them was WNMU, and the cool thing was WNMU would like every Saturday, show Monty Python's Flying Circus. And
Oh
he's
my
like, what
gosh.
is that? And I reached up, I have the entire set of
Oh,
it's 45 episodes. I think it's 14 DVDs of all of those. And I said, whenever you want to borrow these, you may.
nice,
And
nice.
back to everything I do, I think about teaching. I've on my blog that has not gotten any attention in the last 5 years since all of the podcasts. I used to write about teaching like Monty Python because there's several ones that are
Nice.
there's one where they're teaching. I think it's Italian to a bunch of Italians, and it's like crazy that it's like, why don't you do some assessment first to know where they are?
That's
So they
awesome.
are. So I've quite literally put that in his hands.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love it. Wonderful.
And,
Well, thank you so much, Dave. Thanks
oh,
for,
Joel, this has been a blast.
yeah, this is wonderful. I feel like there's gonna be a return visit to Amazon Planet in the future. I
It's a
feel it
nice
coming up.
place. I'm looking around. I
That's
can I
right.
can see setting something up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dave. And again, we'll put links to everything. But appreciate your
Awesome.
time.
Thanks, Joel. Appreciate it.
All right, there's my conversation with Dr. David Coffey on Stephen King's book on writing. Before we wrap up, here's a question to carry with you this week. Who would you want to write a book on teaching? Think about all your experiences that you had learning. Who would you want to write the book on teaching? Maybe that's someone that should be a future guest on Amazon Planet. So maybe you could send them my way to joel@amazonplanet.com. Now it's time for the physical media of the episode. That point of the point of the show where I share an album, a movie, or a book I've been listening to, watching, or reading. It's my small way of connecting with you. And if I'm being honest, it's also probably my excuse to celebrate physical media, the kind that pulls you off the interwebs for a bit and helps you be just a little bit more present. I'm going to talk about the movie True Grit. Just watched the updated version from the Coen brothers that has Jeff Bridges, Matt Damon, Haley Steinfeld, and Josh Brolin in it. That's the newer version. The old version, which I prefer, has John Wayne, Glenn Campbell. I don't know any of the other actors, but it's best known as the film that John Wayne won an Oscar for. And it's good. It's good. Is it his best? I don't know. I would ask my mom about that because she knows John Wayne the best. But she showed that movie to me when I was younger, and it was one of those, like, when I first started collecting movies, I'm like, I gotta get it. I gotta get True Grit because I love it. It's, again, Rooster Cogburn is the character that John Wayne plays, an older U.S. Marshal who is hired by a girl to go find the man that killed her father. And the girl is a very unique girl, like the head of the household, kind of like bookkeeper of the household. And seeing her horse trade in the town and seeing how she arranges to have it's funny, it's sad, it's neat to see how the logic of like going out and finding them and like frontier logic that's happening. I don't know. It's just a classic Western. It's really good. If you like John Wayne, if you just like Westerns and just you're even seeing the beautiful country, and even the Coen brothers adaptation is beautiful as well. And so go enjoy True Grit. It's beautiful. All right, that's it for today's conversation. Show notes are available at amazonplanet.com/episode 149. Thank you so much to Dave Coffey for sharing his time and expertise. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a colleague. It really helps more folks find these conversations. And hey, if you've been reflecting on that question, you have someone you want to have on the podcast, hey, send their name my way. You can also reach out with ideas, questions, or opportunities by sending me a note to joel@amazonplanet.com or join the email list to stay connected and keep the conversation going. Thanks again for spending time on Amazon Planet. Good talk, real learning, better teaching. Peace. In 1962, a young couple in Wisconsin welcomed their first child into the world. Shortly after her birth, they were given less than an hour, 45 minutes, to make a choice, whether or not to send their newborn child to an institution.
We had to make a decision. Are we going to take Kristen home? And we had 45 minutes to make a decision.
They chose to bring her home. What they didn't know at the time was the lack of programs available for children like their daughter. No services, no clear path forward.
There were no educational opportunities, nada, none.
Over the next 6 decades, this family, along with many others, helped build the systems that now support children and adults with disabilities. They worked with other parents, they met with educators, they spoke with lawmakers, and they stayed involved year after year. Not just for their daughter, but for many families who came after them. This special series from Amazon Planet shares their story, not as a single moment in history, but as a long journey of advocacy, education, and community building. It's also a reminder that the work of inclusion didn't happen by accident. It happened because people stayed involved.
Still doing it. Still doing it.
45 Minutes, a family story of advocacy, education, and the ongoing work of inclusion. Coming this fall to Amazon Planet.